Good evening. It is January 26, 2011. Well, last night was Obama's State of the Union address. I jotted down a few notes and I want to make a few comments on it. I believe last night we saw the beginning of Obama's 2012 re-election bid. Now, Obama and the speechwriters who made the speech and his advisors recognized that the tide of the country is changing against centralized government, against wasteful government, and especially against, given the attention he gave it, especially against the national debt. The whole speech was an effort to put Obama in the so-called center. And it was a pretty politically savvy speech. And I have no doubt that a lot of independents who were wary of Obama after watching that speech may be more inclined to support him due to a lot of the rhetoric. But I think that's going to be one of my points, that there was a lot of rhetoric going on, a lot of soaring pro-American rhetoric all throughout the speech. That's pretty common for Obama and all politicians. A lot of anecdotal stories and such. But let's tackle things one at a time. The debt. Obama spent a lot of time on what he called the mountain of debt, which is a bit hypocritical in my view, considering the national debt has gone up by 3 or 4 trillion since he took office. We've had the largest increase in the national debt in American history. Any president, no matter what party, no matter which era, we've seen the greatest increase in the national debt under his presidency. And of course the Bush presidency was really bad too. But he correctly said that the national debt is, quote, not sustainable. He made a good point, and this is where the rhetoric comes in. There was some good rhetoric here. He says every year families sacrifice to stay within their means. Government should do the same. And he's right. And that's one reason, stuff like this is one reason why I think independents may reconsider Obama after his speech. Again, it was a very politically savvy speech. He talked about freezing annual domestic spending for the next 5 years, which only accounts for 12% of the budget. Now, he did mention that fact, that it only accounts for 12% of the budget. But you cannot seriously tackle the national debt as long as we focus on just a tiny little slice of the pie. He said that this freezing of domestic spending, not cutting, freezing of domestic spending, will save only, in 10 years, will save only $400 billion. We're running annual deficits that are like $1.5 trillion or so a year. $400 billion over 10 years is not going to do hardly anything. But he did talk about that. He did say that there will need to be some, quote, painful cuts. And then he used the example, he said already hardworking federal employees, their salaries have been frozen for 2 years. Of course, federal employees get paid way more than employees in the private sector. The working class in the private sector has been hurting a whole lot in contrast to employees in the government sector, which have made it out of the crash of 2008 pretty well. Now, that's not going to continue because I do think a lot of the federal bureaucracy is going to be laid off, not because of Obama, but just because we're going to have to by force. You look at Ireland, Spain, Greece, Portugal, Italy, they're all having to do that. Austerity will be coming to the United States, and these are the painful cuts that Obama's talking about. He mentioned, and I'll get to foreign policy in a little bit, he mentioned how Secretary of Defense Robert Gates has proposed tens of billions of dollars in cuts in military spending. Again, we spend close to $1 trillion a year on a world empire. Tens of billions of dollars is a tiny fraction of what we spend on the military, so that's not going to make a big dent either. Now, he said, let's make sure we don't do these cuts on the backs of the most vulnerable citizens. And I'll agree to an extent. We need to cut military spending before we cut welfare. And I believe we need to end the welfare state as well, especially on the federal level. State level, you know, I believe it wouldn't need to be ended there. But constitutionally, the welfare state has to be ended on the federal level as well. But we need to cut the warfare state first. Because the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of dependent citizens in the United States right now on federal government aid through various means. And it's not always just a straight welfare check. There's other forms of aid that these type of people receive. And cuts in those departments first would indeed hurt those citizens who are dependent on it, even though I do believe we need to make those cuts. But cuts in the military would be best, because that way the so-called left and right can form a coalition, abolish the warfare state, and cut the debt that way first, and then we can address the welfare state later. Unfortunately, and I'll get to this in a minute, Obama has very little, if any, interest in cutting the warfare state. In fact, he's likely wanting to expand it even more. I'll get to that in a minute. Concerning the debt and cutting domestic spending, again, some of the rhetoric was good. He pointed out that he gave a few examples. He said there are 12 agencies that deal with exports. We don't need that many. We don't need any, in my view. But I mean, 12 certainly. I mean, that's just a perfect example of government inefficiency. And Obama's rhetoric did attack government inefficiency. But is he going to follow up on that? He said 5 agencies deal with housing policy. He did criticize a lot of bureaucratic inefficiency, but he'll continue it largely. There might be a few token cuts, but don't expect anything big. I might be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. He talked about... Sorry, I've got a lot of notes here. So the debt, I mean, he said he will veto any bill with earmarks. I'm so tired of this obsession with earmarks, because earmarks are so tiny, and there are a lot of ridiculous earmarks, and they should be cut. But you know, like people will point out, these earmarks that dole out a couple $1 million to some absurd study in Oregon or something. I mean, yeah, that is wasteful government spending, no doubt, and should not be passed by Congress. But a few $1 million is not going to do anything about a debt that adds up to $14 trillion. So you gotta get beyond just the rhetoric and look at the substance. I don't know how there's not substance in a lot of this. All right, with the economy. He said America still has the largest, most prosperous economy in the world, but we have no manufacturing. We have high unemployment, and our unemployment is way higher than 9.7%. The government doesn't count a whole lot of other people who are unemployed. Some economists put the number as high as 20%. But regardless, he said again, some good rhetoric. And he's appealing to that independent base by saying things like this. He said we need to knock down barriers to entry for business in order to compete with the rest of the world. We do. There are too many barriers to entry in the United States to start up a business. It's easier to start up a business in China than it is in the United States, yet we're the so-called capitalists. We have not had a free market capitalist system in well over 100 years, and arguably in the late 19th century we didn't have free market capitalism either. We had Hamiltonian state capitalism. But again, Obama's rhetoric on that, good. Is he really going to follow up on that? I have high doubts. But if he does, good, you know. And he very well might in order to get reelected. Remember, Obama's a politician. There are, like, Dennis Kucinich is not a politician. Dennis Kucinich really believes in what he says. Ralph Nader is not a politician. Ron Paul is not a politician. Bernie Sanders is not a politician. Barack Obama is a politician. So he's going to say what he needs to get reelected. He said we need to simplify and reform the tax code. Another good thing. course, he didn't go as far as say we need to eliminate the IRS and income tax, but, you know, I can't say I expected him to say that. So, but he did point out reforming tax codes to avoid privileges for select industries and corporations. He didn't use this as an example, but Google pays only a 2% tax. It's a great example of how select corporations use lobbyists and such to skirt around the rules. Let's see. He said that he called for Congress to put information online when they meet with lobbyists. I'll tell you right now that won't happen, but if it did, that would be good. That's a huge problem. There is so much corporate influence in Washington right now. Washington is so steeped in corruption. It's incredible. Of course, a lot of those lobbyists come from military-industrial complex, like Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, but believe me, Obama's not interested in cutting down on those lobbyists. Again, I'll get to that in a minute. He said some other good rhetoric on the economy. He said that we need to review unnecessary government regulations of business, and we have way too many of those in the federal sphere. The federal government was never intended to regulate business the way it does, especially through a bureaucratic state. But then he said we need to keep common sense regulations, and he used, for example, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. But if you look at, he said the Food and Drug Administration has made our food safer to eat, right? But if you look at the FDA is in the pocket of big agro and big pharma, and our food is not safe to eat. McDonald's food is not safe to eat. We have our food in this country is genetically modified. We have all MSG is in a lot of products. Our food in this country is not safe. That's a whole nother blog, but I thought I would point that out. Some other rhetoric to appeal to the independent base was on healthcare. He said we need malpractice reform, which we do. And then he said he would invite ideas about reviewing the healthcare law, but he's not going to give up the basics of that. Don't be surprised if he backs away from the mandate and agrees to get rid of the mandate, because the mandate is very unpopular, especially among independents. I would not be surprised to see that go. With all talk about the debt, though, he advanced a lot of new ideas for more federal spending. He said we need to increase government investment of industries and research. But why can't the market handle that? If there is really a demand for a new industry or a new line of research, entrepreneurs will find that and exploit that, because in a free market capitalist society, if there is an avenue to make money, to make profit, individual entrepreneurs are going to pursue that path. We don't need government investment in those industries. That's a Hamiltonian view of the way to deal with the economy. Have the state encourage businesses. And who benefits from these government subsidies? Corporations do. Even in the green economy, which so many people in the left love to talk about, there are corporate interests in the green economy as well. So subsidies, again, it's a very Hamiltonian idea. Government give money to corporations. Now, he did say let's end oil subsidies, and that is, I mean, that's good. We absolutely need to end oil subsidies. Now, foreign policy. Sounded a lot like Bush. I have a few quotes here. We must defeat determined enemies wherever they are. But didn't you just talk about the national debt and how that's a huge crisis? There are costs involved in having an activist foreign policy. An activist foreign policy entails trillions of dollars. It entails a lot of corporate influence through the military-industrial complex. So, again, his policy prescriptions do not line up with the rhetoric. He said, we need to be overseas in order to promote, quote, freedom, justice, and dignity. Dignity, like torturing prisoners, which has increased under the, or excuse me, has been sustained under the Obama administration. What's increased are the drone air attacks on innocent civilians in Pakistan. Is that dignity? Is that justice? Is that freedom? America, if America wants to promote freedom, justice, and dignity, we'll end our overseas occupations overseas, and we'll stop torture, and we'll stop all the bombings and all the and propping up dictators that are pro-American but anti-liberty. He said, quote, the Iraq war is coming to an end. Well, you know, the Democrats said that in 2006. And guess what? You know, they came to power and it hasn't ended, and we still have tons of troops there. And I guarantee you, we'll still have troops there until the economy, until our finances can't take it anymore. Then some more Bush rhetoric. We will deny Al-Qaeda the safe haven that led to 9/11. Blah, blah, blah. This July, we will begin to bring troops home. Well, he said that for a long time. Don't be surprised to see that pushback. And when he says we will begin to bring troops home, if he does follow up on that, there will be token withdrawals. We're going to have troops. Biden said we're going to have troops in Afghanistan through at least 2014. We're going to continue to have tens of thousands of troops in Afghanistan, no matter, you know, how many token withdrawals there are. He said, quote, safe havens are shrinking in Pakistan. What he doesn't tell you is these so-called safe havens are civilian neighborhoods that are being bombed by drone airstrikes. I talk about that all the time. Some of y'all probably get sick of that. But it's important. We cry over 6 people dying in Tucson, and that was a tragedy, yet we don't blink an eye when 100 people are killed from a U.S. bomb in Pakistan who had nothing to do with terrorism. So that's what, so you have to look at it, you have to look past the rhetoric. That's what he means by safe havens are being eliminated. Okay, it's not just words. I mean, these are real things that are happening, real people who are getting killed. He talked about tougher sanctions on the Iranian government. Yes, let's provoke war with Iran. That's all we need is a third war. We can afford a third war, can't we? I mean, so he sounded a lot like Bush. I love this quote. We will not relent, we will not waver, and we will defeat you, Al-Qaeda. You know. He celebrated the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which I also believe was a good thing. But you know what? I don't focus on that because it is nice that gay people can now be open in the military, but the fact is there are so many atrocities going on. That's where the real attention should be. I call on all of our college campuses to open their doors to military recruiters. Well, of course you do, Obama. And if we're withdrawing all those troops, why do we need to recruit more? Could it be because you're planning a war against Iran? All right. He said, quote, we all believe in the rights enshrined in our Constitution, except, of course, the 4th Amendment and the 10th Amendment and, you know, practically everything in the Bill of Rights and, you know, everything in the Constitution, but, you know, we still believe in the rights enshrined in our Constitution. As long as he says that, you know, then we're okay, right? Like, you know, we won't look past the rhetoric and look at the actual policies. If Obama says it and he looks convincing when he says it, we'll just take his word for it that he really respects the 4th Amendment and the Constitution, even though the Patriot Act has been renewed, expanded, even though Homeland Security is setting up checkpoints and has installing cameras and big sisters in Walmart, telling people to spy on others and call Homeland Security if you see something suspicious, and even though there's wiretapping and internet spying by the government, we still believe in the Constitution. Baloney. That's what I say to that. Baloney. So, anyway, I think that pretty much covered everything. Oh, he said Americans need more college degrees. We have too many Americans pursuing college degrees, in my view, or at least graduate degrees. There is a, in the United States, there is a glut of college degrees to the point where if you have a college degree, it doesn't even mean anything anymore. My girlfriend has a master's degree, and she couldn't find a job. She had to take off the master's degree from her resume in order to get hired because there's too many people with master's degrees. It doesn't even mean anything anymore. And Obama's solution to the job problem is we need more people with college degrees. No, what we need is people to be trained in real skills. We need people trained in real trades that will produce things. Not digging ditches and all of these works projects that he talks about, and high-speed rail projects, which, you know, doesn't really produce anything. It just swallows up money, and it's a nice convenience in some ways, even though whenever government operates a rail system, it's always crap. Look at Amtrak. But, you know, anyway, I mean, that's pretty much it. He appealed a lot to the center, and, you know, he's probably going to see his poll numbers go up from this. Again, very politically savvy speech. Have to hand it to you, Obama. He's done pretty well since the 2010 election. He's scaled back on some of the things, but rhetorically, if you look at the substance, it's all still there. All right, that's all I have to say. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.